What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Musi Game here, and today I want to talk to you about the best skill order for the Emperor Qin that you're seeing here on the screen. And as you can see on the screen, I am actually trying to make my best efforts. I've actually used 4 skill resets for me to do this, and I know that might sound crazy. And I'm currently at 1541. I apologize for lying in the thumbnail, but I'm trying to make him 1551 before I actually level up all the other skills. And for specific reasons that I think is gonna blow your mind away. Because typically speaking, most commanders in Rise of Kingdoms, you actually prioritize getting your active skill, which is the first skill, maxed out before you actually work on any other skill. But the way that Qin's skill set is actually working, I think the first skill still does its job at the first level only. And I'll go into detailed math of how that works as well in a spreadsheet later down the video like this. But anyways, let's just go ahead and go back to the game. And for those of you who already expertise him, good for you. Like it is a commander that does take off once you expertise him. I think the damage uplift is like something like 2,000 more extra damage factor for 10 seconds. So yes, if you can expertise him, expertise him. I'm not trying to say that he should be kept at 5555 like Huo Chubing is, but for those of you who have invested heavily into other infantry commanders that came before archer commanders, like myself, I recently just maxed out Bai Qi right before figuring out the fact that Qin Shi Huang was going to be this OP. So for those of you who are like late in the party and who doesn't have many gold heads as I am, and and you're not a whale like myself, I'm not a big whale. I rally in Garrison League, but then again, I'm not a big whale like those people who have like unlimited number of gold heads from weekly shops and stuff, right? And I think 70% of you who are watching this video might be in the same boat as I am, because the 3 latest commander releases for Rise of Kingdoms, which was Arthur, Bai Qi, and Qin Shi Huang, were crazy good that you just could not hold on to your gold heads for those commanders, right? So I get you. Everyone's in the same boat. Most of us are in the same boat, I would say. So you gotta find the best investment options for you when it comes to investing in Qin Shi Huang. And this is basically my take on it. If you disagree, feel free to drop it down in the comment down below. And if you want to talk about this with me on Discord, feel free to join the Discord from the link down below and just argue about it with me, because, man, I'm all ears. If I'm wrong, I'll accept it. I'll apologize, but I don't think I am. Let's jump right into his skill set. Let's just first take a look at what his skills does and like why I think 1551 is probably the #1 priority for Qin Shi Huang. So first, active skill, 1 Conquer 6. This is an active skill that uses 100 rage, and it gives itself a buff, Eternal Emperor effect, and that allows you to use your basic whenever this troop deals direct damage with basic attack via Iron Pierce's bronze skill, it deals 30% of the damage up to 5 nearby enemy troops. Every additional target reduces the damage to each target by 15%. So the way this works is whenever you're using an auto attack, and then you're most likely going to have this Iron Pierce's bronze activated for most of your time, unless you had like 0 rage at that very second. This active skill allows your auto attack to go AoE to 5 targets in a circular AoE format. And this is a very crucial part of his skill set. But the important part that you have to pay attention to is this right here, the upgrade preview. At skill level 1, it does 30% of the damage that you deal with Iron Pierce's bronze skill to AoE, and then it goes up to 60%. And when I first read the skill, I felt the same way about this too, but then again, if you're doing auto attack and then that gets converted to skill damage with Iron Pierce's bronze skill, because that's what Iron Pierce's bronze skill does. Spoiler alert, it uses 100 rage to convert the basic attack into direct damage. that auto attack is going to do 200 damage factor to whatever target that you're hitting. And then when you actually do it to 5 different targets, at level 1 it's going to do 60 damage AoE to 5 targets every second that you're hitting the enemy. And then it does 60% of that 200 damage factor. Because all basic attack in Rise of Kingdom, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is going to do 200 damage factor. So when that's converted to skill damage, it doesn't really matter. It's still going to do 200 damage factor. So this 30% is going to make you do 60 AoE damage factor, 60 damage factor AoE every single turn to 5 targets. And then once max, it's going to do 120 damage factor AoE to 5 targets nearby. So it's going to jump from 600 damage factor in 10 seconds of AoE to 1200 damage factor AoE in 5 targets. And I'll do the math for you later down the road, but that's not a lot if you think about it. That's only a 600 damage factor jump of AoE from skill level 1 to skill level 5, which is very contrasting to other skills that we've seen before, like for example the Arthur skill, right? It goes up from 1600 damage factor to 2800 damage factor. The jump is 1200 damage factor, right? And that is a significant portion of his damage, right? But then again, if you look at Qin Shi Huang's kit, this is actually an enabler skill, right? This converts your auto attack into AoE. But then again, if you read through all of his skill set, this basically allows you to trigger his third skill, which is the main damage source of his kit. But let's just take a look at his second kit, right? Iron Pierces Bronze. Whenever this commander's troop launches a basic attack, it spends 100 rage and won't trigger without sufficient rage to convert the damage into direct damage. The direct damage is equal to 100% of the troop's basic attack damage factor, which is 200 damage factor, as I said before. And this commander's archer units gain 20% march speed and 30% defense. If this command troop only contains archer unit, it also gains 20% health. So there's two parts to this skill. This basically, the first part actually converts your auto attack into skill damage so that it can actually work together with his first skill to do AoE skill damage, which is fine. And then but it doesn't actually scale based on the level of skills that you put into the skill, right? So that part of the skill does not really matter based on how many points that you put into this commander. But then again, the second part does, right? This commander's archer units gain march speed, defense, and health based on how many skill points that you have on this target, on this commander. And this is actually really important part of every commander that you have in Rise of Kingdoms, right? Having 20% march speed for archer is going to be crucial because otherwise you're going to be just sniped down by a lot of cavalry that are just going to target you, for one. And then two, having 2 tanky stats that will allow you to survive longer and then do extra damage on the field will be very crucial for you to have as a kit for your commander in Rise of Kingdom. As a matter of fact, having the 16% difference in health and then 20% difference in march speed, defense, and then 10% difference in march speed from level 1 to level 5 makes this skill very, very crucial skill for you to maximize. So I think second skill is pretty important. But then again, yeah, it's not where you do your main source of damage, and this is not why Qin Shi Huang is OP, but this actually allows you to stay on the same level as other archer commanders that are meta right now, other cavalry commanders that are meta right now. So think of it that way. This is a buff that basically keeps this commander at the same level as other Season of Conquest commander. Now the third skill, which is important, this is also an expertise skill. So for those of you who are wondering where the expertise skill went, this is gonna actually, buff this expertise skill at the end of the day. But let's read this thing. Thunder shakes earth, which converts into seal governs all, one's expertise. But if this commander's troop is in the field and has not been in building for at least 10 seconds, it gains Eternal Emperor effect for 8 seconds. So the first part of this skill basically allows you to use your have the active skill effect right away. So this Eternal Emperor effect, right? This is basically what enables you to do AoE damage with your auto attack, right? So if you're not in a building for the last at least 10 seconds, you basically don't need to cast your first active skill for you to start doing damage. That's basically what this first part of the skill does. And it doesn't really matter because it doesn't scale with how many skill points that you put into this commander. So I'm going to go ahead and skip this part and then move on to the second part. And then this second part is the most crucial part of his kit, as well as why I made this video. Whenever their troop deals direct damage with Iron Pierces Bronze on Eternal Emperor effect, so you have to have the active skill activated, and also at the same time, the second skill has to be doing damage with that 100 rage that you spend every turn. It deals extra direct damage to all targets and drains rage from them. So there's two parts to it. Whenever you're doing AoE auto attack with your first and second skill, you're going to deal extra damage that goes up from 100 to 200 damage factor. And then it also consumes or drains more rage and consumes more rage as you do more damage. And there's actually three parts. So let's first talk about rage consumed, right? Rage consumed is actually a very critical part of his kit because his active skill, which is a 1 Conqueror 6 skill, is going to trigger only based on the amount of rage that you have consumed. So in order for you to keep this skill going for this commander, you will need the rage consumed as high as possible, including the second skill and the third skill, right? So having higher rage consumed is not necessarily a bad thing for this commander. But also at the same time, rage drained is going to also scale up with the extra levels that you put onto the skill. So the reason why rage drained is important is because unless you have enough rage for you to use, you're not going to be able to use this Iron Pierce's Bronze skill as well as the third skill that does extra damage that we're talking about. Also at the same time, Rage Drain seem to allow your secondary commander to also use active skill. So Rage Drain, the fact that you have more Rage Drain is going to impact how you can seal cycle with your first skill and with Qin Shi Huang and whatever the secondary commander that you're using him with as well. And on top of that, it does 100 damage factor to 200 damage factor based on how many skill points that you have on this. So here's the tricky part. It says whenever their troop deals direct damage with Iron Pierce's Bronze or Eternal Emperor effect, it deals extra damage. With waning, which means that after triggering 2 times in a single second, every subsequent trigger that second deals. So every time you deal more than 2 times, you deal 25% less from the previous 2. So the calculation for this, I'll go ahead and do it in a spreadsheet later, but basically, as you do AoE auto attack damage, you deal extra skill damage. With this skill damage factor in Qin Shi Huang's kit, to everyone that you're hitting in that circular AoE is basically what this skill is saying. Now, at 5 level, this is going to go up to 200 damage factor, and then at expertise, it's going to go up to 250 damage factor. Now, this skill alone is actually the core reason why Qin Shi Huang does what he does and is #1 reason why he's so overpowered in Rise of Kingdoms. And I'll go ahead and go over why that's the case, because this skill damage itself is stronger, arguably stronger than the entire kit of Zhuge Liang is. And I may be bold in saying that, but like it really is in terms of damage factor. But 4th skill, let's just go ahead and move on to the 4th skill, and then let's go ahead and move into the calculations and stuff in the spreadsheet. Now, 4th skill, Valor, Best, Despair. If this commander troop is attacking a field troop, whenever they are primary commander, their troop gains 250 rage to 500 rage. So this is important because if you don't have any rage built up, you're not going to be able to use your 2nd skill and the 3rd skill when you're attacking the enemy, right? So having this skill leveled up is going to be important for this commander, right? And then it takes 10% less damage and 2 to 10% less damage of normal damage. And then whenever their troop takes direct damage, smite damage, or combo damage with 300 or more skill damage factor, it spends 20 to 40 rage, and it won't trigger without sufficient rage, to reduce the damage by 10 to 40%. So this skill right here, and it can trigger up to 6 times per second. So this skill right here is very, very crucial because for one, it gives you rage. It also gives you base normal damage reduction, which is going to be crazy because there's going to be a lot of commanders that are on the field that are either going to do combo damage or smite damage right now. And then also it's going to spend rage, so it's going to trigger the active skill a lot faster because it's going to actually spend rage for you to basically, cycle your active skill as much as you can. And also at the same time, it's going to reduce the damage that you take by 40%. Now, granted, if you're in a lot of rage reduction debuff from cavalry, this skill might actually not work as well as we might expect in reality. But just the fact that archers actually get some sort of tankiness from taking massive damage from cavalry and infantry and all that, which is what archers needed at the end of the day because they get sniped out so easily, that having this skill, I think, is a huge benefit and huge addition to his kit. But this is a buffing skill, and it's not a damage factor skill. So I'll go ahead and just keep that in mind when I do the calculations later too. And then the expertise, again, it just basically bumps up everything that is in this skill right here. I think by 25%. So it gives you 50 extra damage factor, which is 25%. 5 extra rage drain, I think, though. So that's actually 33% above. And then the rage consume is going to go up from 20 to 25, which is also another 25% buff. So this just basically buffs up his 3rd skill, which is the important part of his kit. Now we know everything that he does in his skill kit. Let's go ahead and jump right into the spreadsheet that I showed you earlier. And here is how I did the calculation for each skill, right? For skill 1, as I said, 30% of 200 damage factor, which is the auto attack skill damage factor that every single commander in Rise of Kingdom has. And then I basically did level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5 damage. And then I basically did target 1 to target 5. And then I got the max number that you can possibly get from this, right? Because sometimes when you're doing 5 target AoE, you're gonna most likely do your hit your damage cap at 4 targets, because this is where if you hit 4 targets, you're gonna do 220% damage factor to multiplier to whatever damage factor you have, because it's gonna be 55% times 4. When you start hitting 5 targets though, it's gonna do 200% damage of the damage factor that you have, because it's gonna do 40% to 5 targets. So I hit max instead of basically just taking the 5 target AoE, because that does make a difference. And then I multiplied this by 10 seconds for Qin Shi Huang and Qin Shi Huang only, because every skill cycle, just basic rule of thumb is that you're going to do 10-second skill cycle. Usually it takes 10 seconds for Poetry Being or any other cavalry commander to activate their active skills. And all the other commanders in Rise of Kingdoms are going to take 10 seconds for them to do damage, right? And from skill level 1 to skill level 5, I calculated the damage difference between the skill level to skill level 5 because in order for you to know like how much benefit that you're getting from the extra skill points that you're putting onto this commander, you need to know the damage difference between the skill level 1 and skill level 5, not necessarily the total damage that they do, right? So skill 1, from level 1 to level 5, the damage difference is going to be 1320. And 1320 is not a small amount, but it's not a crazy amount that it's not the greatest proportion of the skill damage that gets buffed in Qin Shi Huang's kit. But let's take a look at other skills that he has. Skill 2 is a big buff. I think this is absolutely necessary regardless because of how much march speed that you get, how much defense, how much health that you get from this kit alone. I don't think I need to really stress out how important buffing skill is for Season of Conquest Commander just because of how strong they are. But let's take a look at the third skill, right? So the third skill is important because of two things. For one, it has waning effect damage calculation. So it doesn't work like 5 target AoE, where if you hit more than 4 targets, technically you're doing less damage. But for third skill, you do every single time you activate this skill to every single target, right? So, and then it goes down with a waning effect. With the first two is going to do 100% of the damage. Third attack that you trigger in the same turn will do 75% of the target damage, and then the fourth will do 50%, and then fifth will do 25%, sixth will do 25%. What is really interesting about Qin Shi Huang's kit though is that it's going to do 2 times of his skill to main target that it attacks with, because of the fact that it does Iron Pierce's Bronze effect, which will consume 100 rage to basically do 200 damage factor auto attack to the target that you're hitting. And also at the same time, it's going to also do 60 to 120 damage factor as it gets converted into AoE skill with one Conqueror 6 skill, right? So you're actually hitting twice for the main target that you're hitting with Iron Pierce's Bronze skill as it gets converted into 5 target AoE. And each of those will trigger the Thunder Shakes Earth effect. So with all that said, the max hit that you're going to have with the third skill is actually not 5 times, but it's actually 6 times, unlike all the other AoEs that are in the game that is 5 target AoE, right? So that's how this damage is calculated, right? Again, if you're hitting once with this kit, it's going to do 100 damage. If you're hitting twice, it's going to do 200 damage. And then if it hits 3 times, it's going to do 75% of the base damage, and then which is going to be 75, and then 50% of that base damage added, and then it's going to add 25 from there onward. If it's maxed out, it's going to basically do twice as much of that, and then it's going to go up from max hit. It's going to go from 375 damage factor per turn to 750 damage factor per turn. And once expertise, that goes all the way up to 937.5 damage factor per turn that you deal to 5 target AoE, right? So each second, this is actually DPS of this skill alone for Qin Shi Huang. And what is even crazier though is each skill cycle is 10 seconds for the most part. So, then I need to actually multiply all this by 10 for us to get the 10-second DPS that all the other commanders would have. Like, all the other commanders would have 10-second DPS cycle for their kit, right? But then again, if you're doing it with Qin Shi Huang, it's gonna basically have to multiply the DPS by the 10-second DPS, right? So that's where this math kind of kicks in, right? And from skill level 1 to skill level 5, you can see that the damage difference is 3750 once expertise, that damage factor difference is going to go up to like 5,000 something. But from skill level 1 to skill level 5, the damage difference between having your third skill at level 1 to level 5 is going to be 3750. This is all pre-buff, because Qin Shi Huang doesn't have skill damage buff anywhere in his kit. So 3750 damage factor difference between skill level 1 to skill level 5. And that itself is almost as good as 3 times of the damage difference between the skill level 1 to skill level 5 of the skill 1. And this is why I think having third skill prioritized for Qin Shi Huang is going to be absolutely critical for maximizing his damage output. Now, with all that said though, is the reason why I actually said in the thumbnail 1551 is actually really critical is because for you to use a Seasonal Conquest Commander in Rise of Kingdoms nowadays, having a buff that is on par with all the other commanders is going to be crucial, right? If you have lower march speed, you're going to just be left behind with this commander, right? So having that second skill is also going to be important. So I think number one priority is going to be that third skill. So 1151, I think is going to be the number one priority that you should aim for. It's going to be very difficult, but you have to aim for your third skill max out ASAP with this commander. And then I think the second priority is actually the second skill, right? Because you have to have your commander be able to catch up with all the other troop type. You have to have Qin Shi Huang just run away, or at least have a chance of running away from the murder ball if it gets caught in the middle of the murder ball, right? So having this skill maxed out, I think is also important. So 1551, I think is going to be really, really important. And then I think it becomes a choice of whether or not you should maximize the first skill or the fourth skill, right? First skill will give you extra damage factor. And I mean, like, by all means, the extra damage factor of 1320 every 10 seconds is no small amount. So you can consider running 5551 first, and then it's going to be a heck of a lot easier than having you 1555. Because that means that you need to basically go through a chance of winning lottery at the end of the day for you to actually get that 1555, right? So having 5551 might be reasonable. And then expertising him for that extra third skill damage factor, as well as having the extra tankiness that the fourth skill provides, would, I think, be the most optimal way for you to skill level Qin Shi Huang in as is, like, and in as of June 27th of 2025, we have not seen a nerf for Qin Shi Huang come in yet, so it might be different in the future. But for now, as of today, as of 1 or 2 days, day 2 of seeing Qin Shi Huang's kit, I think this is probably the best way that you can skill level him. And it is a little bit out of ordinary. It is very against what the conventional commanders, all the other commanders actually, prioritize in terms of skill, because all the other commanders actually prioritize the active skill over any other skills, right? So, for example, like people like Guan Yu, whose second skill is kind of useless, but then the first skill, like, this is where you get the most amount of damage jump, right? 900 extra damage factor, and then 450 extra damage factor, and then that is majority of where his damage comes from. But Qin Shi Huang, because of how his skill set works, third skill actually does the most amount of damage in his kit, and hence leveling that up is going to be the most crucial thing in powering of his kit at the end of the day. Wow, I've been talking for the last 30 minutes about Qin Shi Huang. I need a break, and I hope you guys actually enjoyed this video and found this video helpful. If you guys did, please go ahead and drop a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel, because I do something like this every day to make sure that everyone who's watching my channel is getting the most value out of your commander investments and everything that you do in Rise of Kingdoms. So if you do want to watch more stuff like this, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. And it took me a lot, right? It took me a lot to figure it out, but I hope this is really helpful for you as well. All right. As always, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And as always, I'll see y'all in the next video. All right. Peace.